Hi, my name is Farah Abbas, and today I'm going to talk to you about tips to prepare for your green card interview. So at this point, you've already submitted an immigrant petition to the government, you've presented some immigration forms with a lot of information about you, and you've also submitted some documents that they've reviewed. So the interview that they call you in for the green card is to accomplish a few different things from the government's perspective. So first of all, they often see these interviews as a fraud check. So they want to know that the person that is there in front of them at the interview is the same person whose documents they've reviewed and whose information that they've looked into up until that point. They also may want to ask you some questions about the basis for your green card. So however it is that you applied, through the family-based program or employment-based or through an investment, they may ask you some things about your eligibility for those programs that is much better to clear up in person than it is to clear up over paper or through correspondence. So today I'll go over some things that you can do in advance to prepare for your interview, and then what to expect at the interview itself, and then what will happen afterwards. So let's get into it. Okay, so first, what do you need to do before the interview to prepare? Of course, one of the most important things you'll have to do is gather together all of the different records and documents that you'll need to take with you to the interview. And so for many green card interviews, you may have been required to do a medical exam in advance of the interview. And so if that's something that you need to do, sometimes you'll have the sealed envelope report that the physician has given to you to take with you to the interview. Sometimes they send it directly, so you may or may not have it, but if you have it, that's one thing to set aside into a file. And in the file, you'll also want to take a copy of any of the immigration application forms or evidence that you've submitted for your case, and that may include things like your civil documents, birth certificate, marriage certificate, police records. So you likely would have submitted copies of all of these documents in your applications and filings. And when you go for interview, you should have the original documents to take with you. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have the birth certificate that was issued to your parents when you were born, but you do need to have an official government authorized copy that you can take with you. And so usually if you are applying with a spouse or with your children, you'll also want the civil document that establishes their relationship to you, where you're the principal applicant and they're coming along as your dependents. So you'll need to include in the file their own civil records as well. Beyond that, you will want to have a copy of your interview appointment letter, and so you'll always get some kind of confirmation of the appointment with the government office, whether you're applying inside the U.S. or outside the U.S., and so you'll need to take that with you. And then last of all, you'll want to take your passports and any other immigration-related documents that you have. So maybe it's a passport with all of your valid visas and your old passports and other USCIS approval notices, EAD cards, those sorts of records for your past immigration history up until that point in time. So you can put all of these documents, together into a file. Please organize it so that when you're there at the government office, if there are certain records that they'd like to review, you don't want to just hand them over the full file. They may ask for specific items. So you'll want to know, okay, my wife's birth certificate is here. My son's passport is here. You'll want to be able to access these documents quickly so that you can respond if asked for it at the interview. And now let's move on to what you can expect at the interview. First of all, of course, it's very important in every immigration interview to always answer truthfully and accurately to the questions that are being asked. You never want to be put in a position where you feel that you need to hide something or give the incorrect information, that is a very serious violation of the immigration laws. You don't ever want to commit fraud. Remember, this is a government interview and you're speaking to a representative from the U.S. government. And so you always want to have this in mind, that you need to be accurate and truthful. That being said, if you get asked a question and you maybe don't remember what the response is, or you're not exactly sure what it is that they're asking of you, it's okay to say that you don't know, you don't remember, or to ask a clarifying question. Maybe you're not sure if they're asking you for a past address, maybe you don't know what year they're asking from, or maybe you're not sure if they need the exact address and if it's okay to just give parts of the address that you may remember, like the street corner or the town and the street name. And so as far as there are things that you do remember, you can always give some of those details. But again, you don't want to make something up because you're not sure of the answer and you feel like you have to give the correct information. This is a common misperception, that it's really just better to say I'm not sure or I don't remember than to say something that is factually inaccurate. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that you're there being interviewed, and the consular officer or the USCIS representative, the interviewer. And so you should let them lead the interview. You want them to be able to get through all of the various questions and items that they want to ask of you. And so if you just come in and right away give the whole background of your life and your full story and present all of this information, it doesn't give them the opportunity to just go through their checklist and ask all the questions that they have in mind for your case. And so whenever they ask something of you, just take a beat, take a second, think about what is it that they're asking of me, and respond in brief to that question. You can still be honest without having to give your whole history and background in responding to each question. If they want you to go into more detail, they can ask you that. If they feel that you haven't given them enough, then you can go in more detail. But other than that, you just want to help them through the interview and not introduce unnecessary information that may invite them to ask further questions that they didn't even have on their list to ask you in the first place. So let's talk now about what kinds of questions you can expect to get at the interview. So first of all, the interviewer is definitely going to focus on some basic biographical identification questions. This could be something as simple as asking you about where you went to school, about different relatives that you have, about your address history. These are very basic things that they would expect anybody to know and remember about their past history. The other thing is, as you're going through your documents, we talked about getting copies together of all of the filings that you've submitted. And so it really helps that as you're printing those documents and putting it in a file to take with you, that you're also reviewing them. That way it can refresh your memory about what are the things about your past and history that they asked. What are the immigration process questions from growing up and from getting up until this point that you responded to in their forms? And so you should review all of the forms and just be familiar with the kind of information that they already have on file for you, so that when you get to this point and they're asking you these questions, you already kind of remember that these are the things that they know that may come up. Also, while you're going through that file, another kind of question that can come up in the interview is they will often ask you, are there any updates to the forms since you submitted them? Usually you've submitted your filing to the government months in advance of the actual interview. And so they'll want to know about any major updates. Maybe you've moved or gotten a job or had a baby. Maybe you've had significant travel since you last submitted submitted the case to the government. And so you can make note of that as you're going through the forms of these are the things that I should update the interviewer on about my case. The other thing that is a common misperception is that if there's any mistake that's found later on a filing that was submitted already, that your whole case is doomed. Now, that's not going to happen. If there is an honest mistake, typos happen, misunderstandings happen. They expect you to be honest, but they don't expect you to be perfect. And so if you need to correct the record, if you find a mistake that was submitted, you should make note of that and make sure that you bring it up at the interview as something that you noticed in your file needs to be corrected. Finally, they will ask you also eligibility questions. So you may have applied for your green card through the family-based immigration program or the EB-5 immigrant investor program or some other employment-based immigration program or something else. So depending upon how you applied, they will ask you questions related to that particular program. So for example, if you are married to a U.S. citizen and that was how you applied, they'll ask you to prove the bona fides of your marriage. So they'll ask you questions about your spouse, about your relationship, and so you'll want to be prepared on those kinds of questions. If you've come through from something like the EB-5 investor program, they may ask you questions about the status of your EB-5 investment, how you sent your funds to the United States. So again, you'll want to review all of those documents that were submitted in your EB-5 case and make sure that you are well versed enough to discuss it with the interviewing officer. After all of these questions, a very simple question that come up is the interviewer may just want to know very simply, why is it that you're interested in immigrating to the United States? Again, this isn't a trick. They're not looking for something really special, but it's a person that's there interviewing you and they'll see you as the person before them. And so they'll just want to understand, why is this a step that you're taking in your life and what do you see for your future in the United States? So again, you don't need to think too hard about this one, but it might help to just kind of prepare in your mind how you would respond to that kind of question. Okay, so once you've gotten through all the questions from the interviewer, what happens next? It's possible that you may get a response, a decision on the case right there while you're at the interview. And it's also possible that you may not. They may ask you some additional questions, or they may say, thank you for coming in, we have everything we need, but we still need to take some time to make a decision. So congratulations if you have gotten an approval at the interview without having to wait for anything else. But if you have not, please make sure that any additional documents that may be required, that you submit them right away. You should share the request with your immigration attorney and then send in the requested documents so that you're not holding up the government any longer from being able to make a decision on your case. It can definitely be very frustrating to go through that whole interview process and then to not know at the end how it turned out. And so please, don't worry if they don't give you a response at the end of the interview and just tell you to sit tight and wait. A lot of times it could be something as simple as additional paperwork that they need to do or background checks that are required that have not yet been completed. And so you don't know how the interview will turn out until you get an actual notification about the result. So the best that you can do is prepare. Make sure you take all of your records with you. Make sure you review all of your documents. And then, of course, in the interview, give the truthful and accurate responses and be confident in your eligibility for the green card. And hopefully that will lead you to a successful result. I hope that these tips have been helpful to you. Thank you.